to sin. That word, shall we continue in sin? Let me tell you what people think it is saying. What they think it is saying. Shall we continue in sin? What they think it is saying is, because God has forgiven you, do you think you will just continue to be sinning? That's what they think. Okay? If you continue to sin, don't expect grace to abound. That is stupid. That is very stupid. Because the essence of grace is to forgive sin. That's the essence. Somebody says, don't think God is careless with his grace. Oh, don't think God is careless with his grace. Oh, all this grace. Don't think God is careless with his grace. Oh, if you don't know what grace is careless. Grace means careless. Not just careless, reckless. Because grace is unconditional, unmerited, unsolicited for mercy of God. So actually grace is careless. Glory. It means to give it free without condition. That's grace. That word continue in sin is an old English word. That is why it confuses many people who are not diligent with study. It's an old English word used in Acts 10:48. And he commanded them to be baptized in the name of the Lord. Then prayed they him to tarry. The word tarry there is the word continue in, to tarry. Look at Acts 21 verse 4. And finding disciples, we tarried there 7 days. We tarried there. That's the word continue in. Acts 28:14. Where we found brethren and were desired to tarry with them, to continue in. So shall we continue means, shall we stay in sin that grace may abound? Actually, what Romans 6:1 is talking about is the deliverance of believers from sin. That a believer is no more in sin. Moreover, take note, he didn't say, shall we continue to sin? He said, shall we continue in? There's a difference between in and to. The believer is no more in sin. He's been delivered from sin. That's why the word God forbid. That is, it's not possible that since grace has abounded to us, we cannot stay in sin anymore. Since grace has abounded, because where sin abound, grace much more abound. So since grace has abounded to us, we cannot continue in sin anymore. We cannot continue in sin anymore. He doesn't use sin in plural. He uses sin in singular. Now, if you think he's talking about practicing sin, you are very, very misled. Because the same word is used in Romans 11:22. Behold, therefore, the goodness and severity of God on them which fell. Severity, but toward thee goodness, if thou continue in his goodness. If you stay in his goodness. If you continue in his goodness. Is he saying if you continue practicing his goodness? No, it's not a practice. It's to continue in his goodness. So he is not talking about practicing sin at all in Romans 6:1. Look at 1 Corinthians 16:7. For I will not see you now, by the way, but I trust to tarry. Continue. To tarry a while with you. Galatians 1:18. The word continue in. Then after 3 years, I went up to Jerusalem to see Peter, and abode with him 15 days. So basically, he is saying, since grace has abounded unto us, we do not stay in sin. Because right now, we have received the gift of righteousness. So he says, God forbid. Look at Romans chapter 6 verse 2 now. He continues his thought. God forbid. How shall we that are dead to sin live any longer therein? How shall we? That is, if we have reckoned with everything he has been saying, how shall we that are dead to sin live any longer in sin? He is saying impossible. Romans 8:31, see where that kind of word is used. What shall we then say to these things? If God be for us, who can be against us? 32. He that spared not his own son, that is God being for us. He that spared not his own son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not with him also freely give us all things? Hallelujah. Freely. These are questions that have answers in them. Why is it impossible? It is impossible from the things he just said before asking the question. It's impossible because one man, Jesus Christ, has died, and the gift of grace has abounded unto many. Look at verse 3. Know ye not, Brother Paul's know ye not, that so many of us as were baptized into Jesus Christ, were baptized into his death. So the word continue in sin is not practice. It's a word that means to dwell in. Not practice, but to dwell in. You can read the following scriptures for more understanding. Philippians 1:24, Colossians 1:23, 1 Timothy 4:16. Philippians 1:24, Colossians 1:23, 1 Timothy 4:16. So now, what sin is he referring to? Romans 6:1 and 2. What shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. How shall we that are dead to sin live any longer therein? So now, what sin? Romans 5:12. Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. Next verse. Until the law, sin was in the world, but sin is not imputed when there is no law. So the sin is referring to, is it singular or plural? Singular. Actions or the governing principle of sin. The governing principle of sin. Look at Romans chapter 6 verse 2 and 3 so that you just get the full context now. God forbid. How shall we that are dead to sin live any longer therein? Next verse. Know ye not that so many of us as were baptized into Jesus Christ were baptized into his death? That means you have to know. So when we say we are dead to sin, we are referring to his death. Christ's death. Our being dead to sin is identifying with the death of Christ. So in verse 3 is a logizomai. Know ye not that as many of us as were dead to Christ were dead to sin? So when we say we are dead to sin, we are referring to Christ's death. Look at verse 4. Oh, I love verse 4, 5 and 6 now. Therefore, we are buried with him by baptism into death, that like as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in the newness of life. For if we have been planted together in the likeness of his death, we shall be also in the likeness of his resurrection. Knowing this, knowing, key, that our old man is crucified with him, that the body of sin might be destroyed, that henceforth we should not serve sin. Verse 7. For he that is dead is freed from sin. Is that answering verse 1? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? He that is dead is free from sin. Is it clear? Now,